Joining us. Welcome. This is the Course We Do webinar on a Friday afternoon with Sheila Mulvenney today. My name is Andrea Perry. I'm the commissioning and content editor of Worth Publishing and Course We Do. Getting a sense of what self-care means to us all this afternoon. And I think we all know it's something that we should take seriously. We all know that it's the thing we tell everybody else to do. I'm not sure how much we do it sometimes, but we know how actually essential it is really to our mental health. That's what we tell everybody else. So I'm delighted to have Sheila Mulvenney with us this afternoon, who is a trainer, a presenter. She has her own organisation, which is Attuned Education, which I think is a fabulous, fabulous expression, Sheila. She's variously been a nurse, a health visitor, a teacher, a virtual school head, but spends a great deal of her time now doing training and presenting. And is also the author of 2 books, one for Worth Publishing and one which she self-published, Make It Magnificent, which I think is a wonderful title. So Sheila, if I could give you a presentation and share my screen,
yes,
and then over to you.
Right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for turning up on a Friday. And I think whatever setting you work in, whatever your role is, it's been quite a week, both as anyone that works within education and also as parents. It's not been one of the easiest weeks, I don't imagine. So really appreciate you being here, and hopefully you can, in a way, put a bit of the week behind you and just kind of concentrate on yourself for the next 40 minutes or so as we just start thinking about self-care. That's the kind of general question we're going to be asking ourselves. Is it indulgent or is it a necessity? What we're going to look at is, first of all, just kind of to share an understanding what self-care means. It has become very much a buzzword over the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years. I don't know that I heard about it a lot, much before that. And going to look at why we need it more than ever in 2021. I think we were all poised, weren't we, just before 2021 to think that things are going to improve and get a lot better, and I don't think they have for a lot of people. But what we're going to particularly focus on, and what I'd like to invite you to spend a little bit of time thinking about this afternoon, is what is it that stops us? And one of the things that I think stops us is our mindset, and we'll kind of explore that a little bit. And we're going to just ask ourselves a bit, what do we tell ourselves about self-care? And then we're going to finish on a very positive note with looking at some affirmations for self-care. And finally, the hope is everyone goes away with something very practical that you can start in the session and then take away and hopefully finish off yourself around having a plan, a kind of bit of a self-care plan. So looking at Google, the first one I think is self-care is the practice of taking action. I mean, I think that's key, isn't it? That self-care only happens when we actually do the things. I think a lot of us, you know, the classic kind of, you know, oh, I'm going to plan to go to the gym, not that we can at the minute, or go for a run or whatever. And actually, it's actually the taking action, because, you know, particularly at this time of year when it's often about resolutions, we'll often make a lot of decisions of things we're going to do, but then actually we don't always do them. That is the classic thing around resolutions. But and this is all about improving one's own health. But I like the second definition better, because that's the practice of taking an active role. So we've still got that action bit there, but in protecting our own well-being and happiness. And actually, surely that is obviously something we would all want to do. And I do believe that happiness and well-being, there are links. They are different, but there are definitely links. It is easier to be happy when you're feeling well, both mentally and physically, but particularly during times of stress. And I think there is just no ignoring the fact that now is a particularly stressful time. And I think it's a time when our resources are also a bit low. We've all been here before, haven't we? Been here before, came out a bit, been here before in varying ways during the autumn, and now everyone's now back into this lockdown. So just looking at some statistics, this was before COVID by mentalhealth.org, and they'd done this survey. 74% of people felt so stressed that at some point they'd felt overwhelmed. Now that's a huge proportion. And you know, I'm not going to ask you for answers here, but I'd invite you to be thinking yourself, have you ever felt so stressed over recent times that you felt overwhelmed? As I say, these statistics were from before COVID. 46% had said that stress impacted their eating patterns. And I think that's one of the ways that we will often manage stress, is by, for some people, not eating much, or for other people, comfort eating or eating particular kinds of foods. 29%, and I recognize this is, you know, so many days into dry January for those that are doing it, and it's after Christmas, but 29% said that they drank more because they were stressed. And that is an ever-present kind of worry, I suppose, that it's something people can slip into. And 32% of those people who felt they'd been very stressed had suicidal thoughts, which feels absolutely alarming. And then, of course, for November, which was after we'd had the year we'd had, 45% of people reported feeling anxious or worried in the previous 2 weeks. I mean, you know, I would say probably most people I meet would report feeling anxious about some aspect, whether that's maybe the health of relatives or their own health, or not being able to see certain people, not being able to support people in certain ways. 64%, if they'd been a pre-existing mental health condition, had said had felt anxiety. I think this is probably a massive underestimate. Sorry, 25% reported feeling lonely. I think there are such a lot of lonely people around at the moment. 18% reported feeling hopeless, and 49% reported feeling frustrated. And obviously we'll all have our own sort of particular view of that, but if we ever needed self-care, my feeling is, boy, do we need it now, if that's all right. So the current context that we're facing every day, and we do have to be, I think, very understanding of ourselves, is that, you know, there is masses of uncertainty, and generally speaking, we don't feel that good about uncertainty. So we don't know when the lockdown is going to end. It could be February, it could be later. A lot of unpredictability, a lot of frequent changes, as we saw at the beginning of the week, particularly for those folk who are involved in education. So lots of anxiety, and we do need to remember, and it's beyond the scope of this, but, you know, anxiety comes out in loads of different ways. It can be, you know, tearfulness and withdrawal and feeling quite sad and down, but it can also come out as people being quite snappy and irritable, maybe defiant, kind of ready for a fight, and they are all symptoms of what can be anxiety and worry. Obviously for some people there is loss and grief, and, you know, probably if we were all to think, I know I've got a 93-year-old relative in hospital at the minute with COVID, you know, he's in the best place, but, you know, most of us in our families will be experiencing things that are quite hard to handle, really. For a lot of people there's isolation, and of course for some people there's an awful lot of job insecurity or financial insecurity that's come about, and you could probably think of other things. So I think this is an aside, but I think it's important because I think connection remains crucial to our well-being. We'll mention that specifically later on, but it just feels like so foundational. And I think it was a bit of a shame that they talked about the social distance, and I get what they meant, but actually we need masses of social connection, don't we? We need physical distance, but actually we need social connection. And I think it was a real shame that the language developed the way that it did, because I think, you know, maintaining connections is a vital part of our self-care. Talking about how we feel helps us manage our emotions. We know that when faced with difficult times that might be perceived as traumatic in some way or hard to handle, you know, if anyone experiences witnessing a crime or witnessing a car accident, one of the things that helps us is being able to talk about our emotions. So it's really important that we remember that actually in these periods when connections are a bit harder, we need to make sure we avail ourselves of opportunities to talk and provide those for other people, because being heard and validated is important. Just the fact of saying to somebody else, do you know, I'm finding it really tough, makes a huge difference. However well-resourced and resilient we think we might be, it can make a huge difference just acknowledging that. And so I do think it is important to share our stories, to talk about how we're perceiving it, because that can often give strength to somebody else, because there's that sense of we are in it together. It is difficult. We have all experienced and are experiencing this pandemic. We all have our own individual experience of it, which is very, very different for all of us. And we all have a story about that experience. And I love this quote, that we are as powerful as the stories we tell. It is important for us as individuals to frame our story. And I think that does have a bearing on self-care, which I'll explain in a minute, because, you know, if we frame our story as one who is a victim, one who is experiencing things, and in some ways, obviously we all are, then that can become something that's quite damaging for us. If we can frame it as in, actually, this is something everyone's experiencing, this is what my particular experience is, and this is what are the good bits of it. Because I do believe that if we can start to focus, and sometimes you have to look incredibly hard, but you have to, you know, my husband and I are often saying to each other, but you know, we're not seeing our kids and that sort of thing, but we've got a warm home, we've got a comfy bed, we've got food in our cupboard. It is about that, making a decision to focus on what we can do and what we have got, as opposed to what we haven't got and what we can't do. But that's a bit of a kind of preamble. So why should we take care of ourselves? And I think, like with anything, if we're clear on that, on what our reasoning is, that can be massively motivating. So I can remember only once in my life I ever got really into running, and I decided when it was my 50th I was going to do the Great North Run. Now, because I'd made a decision I was going to do that, then I had a really high motivation to get out running, because I had this end point coming where I had to get myself around 13 miles, which was great, brilliant experience, and wouldn't do it now, but there you go. But if we can be clear about why we're doing what we're doing, why do we need to keep ourselves well, what are our main reasons, and we'll come back to that later, then you know, that's a great motivator. So we would probably all agree that there are benefits to looking after ourselves. There are benefits for us, but there are also benefits for others. And it is work again. I'm not going to ask you to, this might come up in your personal wellbeing statement later, but it's worth you thinking who benefits by you staying healthy and well. Obviously you do, but my guess is for all of us, there'll be some other people that benefit from us staying healthy and well, people probably that we care a lot about. So when we're thinking about what stops us taking care of ourselves, because I don't think anyone would disagree that we should take care of ourselves, yeah, and I think some of that was echoed in those early comments in the chat, then one of the common things people say, it's a lack of time, and I totally get that. And time, but this is a little quote from Lao Tzu, that time is a created thing. To say I don't have time is to say I don't want to. Now I say that with gentleness and caution, but I know yesterday I knew you should do a walk at lunchtime, because I find if it gets to the end of the day it's dark and it doesn't happen. And I was really busy yesterday, I had loads to do, and I had a real kind of, you know, to and fro with myself, and I did decide to go for a walk, because that is what making it priority is all about. Now, there's been other days when I haven't, yeah, but it is that kind of, you know, it's not just when we can fit it in, it's about deciding that it's so important that that has to take a priority. So maybe our lack of motivation to do the things we need to do that we know will help us can be changed by us thinking about what is our motivation. But I think what's underneath it is we have some mindsets that effectively stop us from taking care of ourselves, or make it less likely to happen. Yeah. Now the mindsets, and this is very much the subject of my book, Make It Magnificent. It's all about mindsets. They kind of run in the background. We might not even be aware that they're happening. They're usually things that have kind of we've picked up over time, very often from childhood or from other significant relationships, and they have a powerful impact on what we do. Now, as I say, they run in the background. They're kind of subconscious. The good news is they can be changed, and that's very much the sort of, or eliminated, very much the subject of my book, the negative mindsets. But to get a little bit of an insight into them, you can often start just noticing your self-talk. We all are accompanied, aren't we, by little voices in our heads, and we're not, you know, going to be committed anytime soon. It's absolutely normal. But, you know, you decide to do something and you'll have a little voice saying, oh, I don't think that's a good idea. Or that's brilliant, yes, or whatever it is. So I think that's one of the important things one of the important kind of windows into the world of what our mindsets are. So what we're going to do now is have our little Menti session, where I'm just going to invite you to think about when you are if you were to start noticing now your self-talk, the things that might, as you're thinking about self-care, you know, over the weekend, the little voice that might be saying, oh, but you've got a busy weekend, or any other things, just to think about what kind of words come up in your self-talk when you think about self-care.
But yes, this is exactly it.
This
Lovely.
is great.
Well done.
Seeing
well done, guys.
Yeah.
Exactly like that. Just put in as many as you like that just are very short words. Oh, well done. Oh, look at tired. Tired.
Isn't it brilliant? I know.
Whoa.
We've got unworthy and not worth and rubbish. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's exactly it. They're exactly the things that are going on. Yeah.
Stupid. I saw stupid flying past then. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Wow. Gosh, do you know, guys, you are amazing considering how generous you are with everybody else. If this is how you're talking to yourselves, and yet you're putting all of that out towards other people, I mean, just let's all pause for a moment and just register that. It's incredible.
Yes, I think
what generous people can't. Tired time. Look at that.
No, put others first. Yeah, but that's a biggie.
Pointless. Look at that. Undeserving. Tomorrow, tomorrow is the alien of improving today, isn't it? Tomorrow is that procrastinating belief, really. Wow. Stupid's got bigger as well. Goodness me. Oof. Okay, let's leave it at that for the moment. That is quite, actually, it's become an egg. Normally these things, hasn't it? It's normally a little blob in the middle. It's become the limiting self-talk egg is how I shall now think of it. Well, we're going to have to help you to hatch. Goodness me, that's amazing. It's really super powerful, isn't it? I feel quite moved by that. Yes, we'll go back to your presentation.
Yes, I was just going to mention a great quote. I think it's Brené Brown. Talk to yourself as you would to someone you love. And, you know, you're all people that would probably be incredibly kind to others. And yet sometimes we find it so hard in our self-talk to be kind to ourselves. The kind of common mindsets that come up that will effectively sort of stop us in our tracks are, many of those were mentioned in the self-talk, so that our needs either don't matter or they're second or third or fourth. So that, you know, you have this idea you're going to do this, but actually this person needs this. And obviously, you know, in the real world, a lot of people have family responsibilities, work responsibilities, you know, they're definitely juggling. But often the mindset is, well, actually leave yours, put it off. And what we know is often if we put it off, it doesn't happen. That I should, and a great way for looking for limiting should and must and always and never, yeah, the whole I should look after others, and yes, we have responsibilities, but that they should never be so great that we can't look after ourselves. In fact, very often, you know, the old oxygen mask thing, if we're going to be looking after others and we don't look after ourselves, we will get to the position where we probably can't look after others very effectively. And that a lot of that comes from other people's needs being more important than mine. And that's sad, but I think that operates in the background for an awful lot of us, and very prevalent in people who have caring responsibilities. And obviously there is an element where, you know, there is a responsibility to care. So for example, parents with maybe disabled children and things like that, people that are looking after aging relatives, yes, there are those, but it still doesn't mean that your needs aren't important too. But some of the slightly more limiting ones are the belief that you don't deserve to be looked after, that you don't deserve either to be happy or healthy or well, that no one else cares about me, so why should I care about myself? If you have that sense that actually you're not important, then it's going to be very hard to make time and do those things that look after you. The idea that needing to keep everyone else happy, which runs a lot. And I think there are some people who would definitely define themselves as people pleasers, even when it comes to kind of what takeaway should we have tonight, if that's happening. They'd be the person that says, oh, what do you want? What do you want? And they just go along with it. And they are things that can have a big impact on how we care for ourselves. But then there's other things like almost an assumption some people have that whatever they do won't be effective, because some people have a bit of a mindset around the fact that their families maybe been ill, maybe they've grown up along with a lot of illness, and therefore they think actually the writing's on the wall, whatever they do maybe won't matter. And some people thinking it is their personality to be stressed. Well, actually, you know, it's very much, I think, stress is normal, it's natural, there's different types of stress. We can all get better at how we handle it and how we manage it. So they're just some of the mindsets. We could do a whole set on that, but whose job is it to look after you? And actually, really no one else can do it for us. They can support us, they can encourage us, they can kind of release us a bit to do it or not. And I think sometimes we have to be very aware that in some relationships there might be things that you know, might be people that actually suggest those mindsets to us, maintain those mindsets by sort of saying, but aren't you going to do this for me? And actually it is okay to be a bit assertive and to put ourselves first, but we'll come to that in a minute. I think it is a personal response. Sorry.
No, I was just going to ask you a question that's popped up absolutely in relation to that, which I think is probably pertinent now, but I think this comment is exactly right for this slide, if it's okay. Is how do you go from putting everyone else first to putting yourself first without becoming totally self-absorbed? How do you prioritize?
I think there's a very small risk that you become self-absorbed. I think we almost needn't worry about that. I think that how you go from putting everybody else first to putting yourself first, or giving yourself an equal time, yeah, that's not to say you're going to completely walk over the needs of others, is to start using those affirmations. Actually, your needs are as important as anybody else's, yeah. And it is about balance. It's not to say you're going to spend a whole day looking after yourself, but it's about actually making times when that is the priority. That, you know, maybe on a Friday afternoon, maybe on a Saturday lunchtime, but we're going to look at how you can plan it. There are going to be some times in every day where your main job that time is to look after yourself. And one of the ways to manage the mindsets that are damaging is to just state the truth. And actually, you know, the truth is that you are as important as anybody else, yeah. And certainly if you have a caring responsibility, part of your valuing that person you care for is looking after yourself so you can continue doing it. Does that sort of make sense?
And yeah. I guess another answer could well be, if your priority has been on other people, you can't make 100% switch. So the answer is probably slowly, isn't it? Little slow things here and
slow
there.
Steps, absolutely.
Yes, slow change.
Slow change, absolutely. So I do think we do need it for us and for our own well-being. Yeah, and I think it is a responsibility we have. You know, we're talking about, let's be honest, we're talking about pressure on the NHS. If we can do things that look after ourselves physically and mentally, then actually that is good for everybody, good for the people we live with, good for the people we work with, good for the NHS. So every act of self-care is a powerful declaration that I am on my side. You know, I think actually in terms of dealing with mindsets, when we actually, it's about that taking action. When we start to do things that say, actually, my needs are important. So yes, I'm going to get to that in a minute. But right now, what I'm going to do is go and sit and have a quiet coffee and read my book for 10 minutes, or I'm going to go and, you know, have a walk, or I'm going to go and do my exercise. I'm going to go and make myself a meal. Whatever it is, any act of self-care gives us that message quite powerfully, because it's not just, we're not just telling ourselves we're going to do it, we're actually taking action. Next. So we're going to look at a bit of a plan. So I just thought it's quite useful to have a thing. So the first thing we have to do is start noticing, which you did beautifully in that word cloud, what the negative self-talk is, and sort of replacing that with positive affirmations. So for everyone that comes up, try and flip that on its head. So it's like, well, I'm not deserving. Well, actually I am. And you know, we'll come back to that in a minute if that's all right. Oh, yeah, thanks. So, and the way to counter a mindset is just tell the truth. If it's a false mindset, if it's something telling you you're not important, you don't deserve to look after yourself, other people's needs are more important to you, the easy way to shift that is say, actually, yes, other people's needs are important, but so are mine. Yes, other people deserve to be happy, but so do I. Yeah, so you just kind of refute it with the truth. Not saying it's easy, takes a lot of, you know, repetition, but you can get there. A good way is looking into the mirror and saying, my needs are important. Yeah. And then setting an intention to make a self-care a priority. Now, I kind of like the idea of an intention rather than a resolution, because my own you know, success with resolutions has not always been brilliant. But I think an intention that actually self-care, we're not going to go from maybe not being very good to being brilliant in a week, but what we can intend to do is every week make a little change, or every day, that means that by a month's time we can see that we are taking better care of ourselves than we were today. And we're going to, if we have time, we'll look at a positive wellbeing statement. And then to make a realistic plan. And you know, we're talking about mental and emotional and physical health because we know that they are, it's weird the way we almost think of them as separate, because we're whole people, and we know if our physical health isn't good, that will impact us mentally and emotionally, and the other way around. So, you know, creating some self-care, some well-being goals for ourselves that are kind of realistic. But also, and I think this is a really important aspect of self-care, is building in treats. Yeah. So at least a small one every day. It might be very small, but something every day you can look forward to doing for yourself. Yeah. Whether that's a crossword in the paper or a call to a friend, but something that you will enjoy. Think about your happy bucket. Put something into your happy bucket every day. But then every week, put something a bit bigger. Yeah, so that might be a Zoom call with the family, or a, you know, watching a good film, or different things like that. Can't be a trip to the theatre, can it? Let's be honest, sadly. But you know, those kind of slightly bigger things that we might enjoy. And then again, every month, something a bit bigger. So all the time, you've got kind of things to look forward to. And I bought a calendar the other day and I did question myself, what am I going to put on my calendar? I am going to write some things on my calendar, because of course a lot of those slightly bigger treats we're going to have to be a bit inventive about at the minute. But I think it's also important that we look back, so every so often have a bit of a review and be accountable to someone you trust. So the idea is, I would suggest, if you do a bit of a plan, maybe share it with somebody and say, should we just check back in a week how we've done? Because we tend to always, I mean, review it yourself is good, but often that little bit of accountability can make us can make quite a big difference. Now, the next slide, this is from Dr. Chris Moore, who this website, EdPsych Insight, has quite a lot of really good stuff on. And he came up with some affirmations for self-care. Now, I'm not going to go through them because they're very small for you to read, but you will get this with the document. So I'd invite you to have a look about that. But one of the ones I picked out is, you know, work towards the ideal in small steps. Yeah, it's really good, practical stuff. So do have a read of that. So what I'd like us to think about is creating a positive wellbeing self-care statement. So the idea is this could be anything you like. So it could be like, I'm really grateful that I've got a healthy body and mind, and I want to look after it. Yeah. It could be that my needs are as valid as anyone else's, so it's okay for me to allow time. So you've got to focus on what are the things that would stop you, and how can you make that into something positive. So, and it might be that actually, if you're, for example, if you're a parent and you've several small children, or then actually you want to keep yourself well so you can keep caring for your children. Yeah. So I think what I'd like you to do is think about for a minute yourself, coming up with a statement that sort of, it doesn't have to be long and complicated, but kind of it's why you want to look after yourself. Yeah. What is your statement? I'm going to, you know, try to improve my self-care because, or it doesn't have to start like that, but some kind of statement that will motivate you and remind you why you want to make those little changes that will mean you look after yourself a bit better.
But what would be your affirmation, do you think? And you may find that it takes 2 or 3 to refine what you feel you could actually authentically say that you think is something that actually will mean something to you and will stick. Because as Sheila said, this isn't a resolution, is it, Sheila? This is not like a high thing to aim for. It's more like an authentic, like that. I'm worthy of it. I'm worthy
really
of it.
good.
I'm just as important. Yeah, just
absolutely
simple,
right. These are brilliant. Yeah. And you know, often they need repeating a lot. That's why if you write it down, we're going to come on to a kind of plan that you can have again, which you will get. And just writing that at the top, so every time you look at that plan, you're just reminded that you are worthy. Yeah, that you are deserving. Yeah. Wow, there's some great I'm just so impressed, everyone. At the end of a long week, here you are, and isn't it brilliant, Andrea?
It's amazing.
I know.
Absolutely amazing. Not to resent, be kind. Just be kind, and let's hope this is be kind to myself.
Absolutely. We find it so much easier usually to be kind to others than to ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't it?
And if you always think, if a friend came and said, oh, I really want to do so and so because I know that really helps my self-care, but I haven't got time, what would you say to that friend? You know,
yes, look,
you
this
help
is
them
lovely.
try to find a window. Yeah,
I'm compassionate.
Brilliant.
I am kind. Yes, you are all those things, and also, of course, there's quite a lot of research that shows that if you hold words like that in your mind and then really try to allow them to go into your body, there's been quite a lot of research that shows that actually modifies your brain waves in the direction of calm and of heart, what's the word? The heart stabilization anyway, and it can move it in a really positive direction. So even thinking of the word compassion, recognizing I am compassionate, and that can help you to breathe in the kind of hormones or to generate the hormone state of compassion, which can include yourself. Guys, these are beautiful people. These are really
absolutely wonderful. And of course, you don't just have to have one statement. You can do as many as you like. You know, when you
yes, you can have as many as you like.
Yes,
cut them out and stick them around the room.
Absolutely. Well, do you know, there's not a bad idea in that, is it? Reminders. Yeah, certainly for things like affirmations, that's often quite good. Sticking one, you know, on the mirror where you'd, you know, brush your hair, or on the fridge where you'd go and get your breakfast, you know, just reminders. You are worthy, you are deserving, for example. Yeah, just having that on your fridge. Yeah.
I have a fridge magnet from the Dalai Lama, of the Dalai Lama, who says, be kind wherever possible, full stop, it is always possible. It's like,
absolutely right.
Actually, even just holding on to the idea of kindness for oneself can generate it inside.
Yeah. No, I think they're great. Yeah.
Look at these. Brilliant. There's some really beautiful ones coming through here, aren't there? Absolutely. So I'm able to be there for my family and friends. Yes, we want you to be here as long as possible so that you can be.
They don't want you to be ill. No, people that love you want you to stay well. Yeah, they might not always demonstrate that in the most kind way, but they do want you to stay well.
Lovely.
Gosh, so many. It's brilliant. Brilliant.
I am a valuable resource. That's a lovely one, isn't it? Yes, for the planet. For the planet, we all have our place. Please go and listen to Kate Bush. You know, and we're all part of the symphony, a very necessary part of the symphony.
Absolutely.
It's a great line, isn't it, from Kate Bush? Now I know I'm needed for the symphony. Which is beautiful. Okay.
You've got this well-being plan just for you. The idea is you could write your own statement there. You can take some of those, but then I think it's quite important to give yourself some fairly simple goals. Now you could do this for a week, for a day, for longer. My feeling at first is if you do very short-term things, so plan maybe for the weekend, what would you like to do? It would be good for you in terms of your physical health. Yeah. So maybe a little bit of exercise. How can you practically fit that in? Or maybe something like, I don't know, maybe looking at your diet a bit if that's not being brilliant. Maybe working on your sleep, because I know a lot of people, if they are at home all day, then actually that sleep can become difficult because we're not maybe doing as as much activity and things. And then your emotional and mental goals in terms of things that help to calm you, help to feel grounded, help to feel level. So that might be things like gratitude, it could be some mindfulness, some meditation, whatever kind of things work for you. And then some social or creative goals. So connection is very important, but we also know that things like creativity have quite a powerful effect on our sense of well-being. So maybe little things like spending some time doing a hobby that is creative that you've maybe not done for a while, making that point of making those connections. I had a friend the other day who we worked together and were quite close for a while, and these and they can be short term just for today, they can be longer, but we'd got to where we were just sending Christmas cards, and she we used to meet up but hadn't met up probably for about 3 years, and she just picked the phone up and called me the other day, and it was so lovely. So I'm going to do that with somebody else that I haven't seen for a while, because we just had a chat, and it can be that just pick the phone up and call someone that maybe you would normally talk to, but because of the current situation, not perhaps your nearest and dearest, because I'm sure you're doing that, an extended family even, but perhaps some of those other kind of slightly further away connections, but that are still good. And then sometimes, like with anything, if we anticipate the challenges, we're halfway there. So what are the challenges? So for example, if you plan to go for a run or a walk or something and it's raining, what are you going to do? Are you going to switch and have another idea? Because if you think ahead, often it's much easier to overcome them. If you decide you're going to do something and then the chances are maybe the children will need you at the time, or something else might crop up, how are you going to overcome that? How can you slot it in later? So this is, I would suggest when you start, you do very short-term ones, yeah, because I think then you can monitor it as you go along. But it's for you to use in whatever way you think will work best for you. So I also think self-care is a very serious business. It's way beyond the bubble bath, yeah, because self-care is about us staying well, staying fit, staying healthy. But I think we don't have to kind of throw out that notion that some of those little things actually add up and mean quite a lot. So it is important to be kind to ourselves. Notice your self-talk. Any self-talk that isn't kind just needs to be silenced. And again, there's if there's a voice telling you can't do it, was it Picasso that said, if someone tells you can't pick up the paintbrush and paint, if your inner voice tells you can't pick up the paintbrush and paint, by all means do it, and it'll probably shut up the voice. Yeah. So it's, if you've got a voice saying don't self-care and you start to self-care, that voice will get less. Yeah. Anything that fills up your happy bucket, what makes you feel good, what makes you laugh, what is fun, that's self-care. Just deciding that maybe you're not going to do the chores, you're going to sit and play Twister with your kids, that is a wonderful way of the whole family laughing, or sitting watching a favorite old movie that always makes you giggle. All those sorts of things are brilliant. Simply doing things you enjoy, and that's very personal to us, and it's not selfish. It is okay to spend time doing things we enjoy, and try to think of some of those little things that can be fitted in easily in your day. So every day, just make sure you've got a few little things, at least one, but I would say a few little things that you can look forward to doing. So self-care is much more than a bubble bath, but the bubble bath can help too. Yeah. So those moments when we just retreat that are just for us. That I've just seen a quote where someone says, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. That's exactly it. Yeah. So self-care, these are just a few things to remember. They're quite small, so I'll just go through a few of them, but it's not a luxury, it's essential. You are worth looking after. Take that as a truth from us to you today. You are worth looking after. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. Little things in small doses count, if you see what I mean. Little bits of self-care. In fact, there's a couple of great Instagram accounts, and one of them gives ideas of 5-minute self-care. That sitting quietly with a coffee that you enjoy, that sitting reading a book, reading a newspaper, 5 minutes of sitting doing some crocheting or whatever you like. So regular small doses can be really effective. Yeah. Think about, again, why you need to look after yourself, because that's really motivating. If you keep reminding yourself, I need to do this because I want to stay well and my family need me to stay well. think about the particular things that help you, that make you feel good, and they are going to be very individual, and it doesn't matter that somebody else doesn't think it makes you feel good. If it makes you feel good, you do it. Yeah. And then setting an intention, that is kind of deciding that self-care is going to be priority. And it's a bit like a resolution. I mean, it's a little bit of semantics. I just think it's quite a helpful thing. I intend to look after myself, and I'm going to kind of rehearse that myself, you know, as an intention. Today, I'm going to look after myself. And I think making a plan that you've got, it just helps along the way. You don't have to spend a long time doing it, but every day set that intention, then think, well, what am I actually going to do today? Yeah. So very similar to that others. If you find yourself saying, I can't, just try asking yourself why. Yeah. So if you find saying, oh, I can't do a walk today, oh, I can't sit and read the book today. And there will be some days when realistically things might happen and stop you. And that's okay. It's not worthy of a guilt trip. But, you know, if you find yourself asking why, you might think, well, actually, there isn't a good reason why. This person might be pressurizing me not to, but actually, I know it's going to do me good. So just to think about that. And then the last one was just the links. Yeah.
Well, here's one. When support isn't available for you to help with a caring responsibility, it can lead to frustration when you then want to put your own needs first. That can build resentment. What do you suggest for that?
I think it is very difficult. I know on Twitter, I'm in touch with quite a lot of parents of quite severely disabled children, and that is a constant frustration for them. I think they do feel quite let down by some of the services and not supported. I think we've got to start small, and I think sometimes we put wrong pressures on ourselves. Now, I know that I'm not in any way minimizing the huge weight that must be, but I think for everybody, there are times when it is reasonable to say, okay, they're now in bed, I'm not going to do the ironing. I'm going to elect not to do the ironing. We'll just wear unironed clothes or whatever it happens to be. And what I'm going to do is give 5 or 10 minutes for me. Because actually, I think when you start doing that, like you say, that helps you not only in a self-care sense, but it stops that frustration and resentment building up, which is really negative and eroding. And I think sometimes we pile pressure on ourselves. Who says we have to iron clothes? I've just picked that as an example. But, you know, we all do some things. And actually, if we didn't do them, it probably wouldn't be the end of the world. Yeah, there's lots of lovely poems about children. You know, I'm not saying we can have houses that are pigsties, but, you know, a little bit of dust isn't going to be a massive problem for most people. You know, a bed that maybe isn't changed quite as often as it should be. It depends on the situation. Obviously, you can't let children go to sleep in soiled things and that kind of thing. But I do think, you know, it is about that, trying to build in tiny little things, but small changes, I think. Yeah. Does that seem reasonable? But I acknowledge it's tough as well. And what we don't want to do is pile extra pressure on yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more, Sheila. And I think there's something there about, you know, if the self-talk goes, but I really can't, it's like, even if I am rushing from one thing to the other, I can stand by my car for 1 minute and I can breathe in this car park. And that is something, because I definitely think that and someone has put a really interesting thing in the chat here about the fact that the brain, or perhaps the brain cells near the heart, will resist the self-talk. And of course that's true, because there's always a pushback, because we have to remember that self-talk has come from a place of trying to protect us. It's an old script, but it's trying to protect us. So when we try to let go of a protection, it's like we're trying to let go of a life belt, isn't it? So the brain goes, no, you mustn't let go of this. That's why it's got to be slow. That's why it's got to be gradual. But I think, you know, from what you're talking about, these small doses mean a lot. And they're small if they're real world. We can't just think ourselves into doing these things. And the brain and our system, I think, takes most notice when we actually do something real. So if you've stood by your car for 1 minute, or if you've gone to the front door and breathed and noticed that the across the road from here, the window box is flowering beautifully, and if I can just register that for a moment, and then I can take that back in with me on a physiological basis, which my brain, my self-talking brain, can't deny. So I think we have to give ourselves that real world evidence, don't we? And then whatever the self-talk is saying, we can go, okay, well, I can hear that you don't agree with this, but actually I'm going to go and stand in that doorway.
Going to do it, yeah. Let's see how it goes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So make tiny changes. A favorite song lyric from Frightened Rabbit. Yes, I'm a big fan of tiny changes, because tiny changes tend to accumulate, don't they? And by the way, the expression I was thinking about earlier on was heart rate variability. When we have heart rate variability in a good way, like as with heart math, then our hearts are in a good state. So
yeah. And nobody runs a marathon without first running 2K or something. It is about that starting small, doing what's manageable. Yeah. So, you wouldn't expect someone to go from nothing to doing something massive. They'll do little things first. Yeah.
Yes. There's another question here. We just got a few more minutes left, saying, as a people pleaser, I'll try and just read this exactly as it says, yes. Sheila. As a people pleaser, I often find it hard to see the difference between what makes me happy and what makes others happy until I haven't got the response I wanted or expected after the event. How do you overcome that?
I think one of the real deep problems for people pleasers is knowing what they really want, which I kind of think is what they're saying. Is that right? Yeah. And actually, I think you've got to do again, just small stuff a little bit, sort of, thinking to yourself, what do I really want? And sometimes the only way you can do that is kind of thinking of one outcome and saying, well, if that's the outcome, I'll give you a very silly scenario, but I remember when children were little and we'd go and get a video from the local video shop. And if we couldn't decide between two, we'd put them behind our back and pick one, and guaranteed people would know then, was that what they wanted or not? Yeah. Because often it's, I don't really want that. So I think it's almost like put yourself in that situation is, because it's very hard to separate out trying to please the other people, trying to keep people happy. But I think you've got to try and do a bit of work first on actually acknowledging what it is you want, because I think when you've done years of pleasing other people, your own wishes and desires have been so squashed down that you need to give them a little bit of time to bloom. Yeah.
Again, slowly. You can't expect to switch, can you? You can't expect to shut that voice up by any means. It's a slow process. And in a way, coming back to your thing, Sheila, about being kind, to actually move to a position where self-care and other care are balanced has to be a kind process, because if you're doing it by beating yourself, it's a bit
you're never going to get there. As soon as you start beating yourself up, it's you're kind of losing, aren't you, really?
Absolutely.
So it's like, even if if you make a plan and you do nothing, that's okay. You just make another plan and be kind to yourself. Okay, well, it didn't happen last. It didn't happen last week, yesterday, whatever, but actually it can now. It's a fresh start. Yeah,
absolutely. So that self-talk change is such a slow process, and it's just like with meditation or anything like that, it's always about the willingness, isn't it? It's about the willingness to do this. Just one tiny last thing, and just as a brief answer, Sheila, if you can, but somebody has said that they've noticed their resentment about doing stuff for other people has really increased over time. And is there something that you could suggest for that, and any literature, any ideas about that? I have a thought myself, but if there's anything that you can
nothing comes immediately to mind, other than I think the more that you start to put your own needs as equal, at least, to others, then I think that starts taking care of the resentment, because I think resentment, as I say, if it takes hold, just really robs you of kind of peace, really, doesn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. And so if you did want any literature, I would really suggest looking at Dan Hughes, because what Dan Hughes talks about is blocked care. And if we're having to give care to other people and we're resenting that suggests that you're not getting, as Sheila says, enough coming back towards you, not enough empathy for you. So I would suggest find your best friend, someone you really trust, go and tell her or him all the resentments, just tell them, and then just get that person just to kind of hear you validated, as Sheila said, and empathy, and you will find it naturally organic coming. We can't beat ourselves into a position of unblocked care. No, we cannot beat ourselves into doing it. We have to melt ourselves, and the best way to do that is get somebody else alongside you to empathize with you, because if you're resenting it, then it sounds like it's in imbalance. Someone who can empathize with the imbalance that's been created.
Lots of interesting stuff
in the project. Oof, there's so much brilliant stuff about that. And Sheila, thank you for a lovely presentation. It's super helpful, and I hope affirming for people to take away with them this weekend. Go on, Sheila.
No, I was just going to say, the other thing is sometimes you only notice the benefit something is giving you when you don't do it, because I'd got into just doing very short meditations every morning and then missed it for a few days, and I could really feel the difference when stress things happened. I was just a bit more ready to pop than I would have been. And so often you don't notice the benefit of something when you're doing it, but you notice it when you stop doing it or you miss it.
But what we know is that there's a perfect relationship between exercise, sleep, good nutrition, and exercise, sleep, and good nutrition. If those three things, whichever one you adjust, will have a brilliant knock-on effect on the others. And we have to remember old Maslow got it completely right. It's those really super basic needs, isn't it, that we all need to attend to, along with the belonging and the self-esteem and so forth, in order to to be able to build up to what we're going to get to, thinking of it as self-care and without making it anything more than it is. It's just a question of keeping ourselves in the state that we want to be in, and we want everybody else to be in too. So this is our gift to you, really, for the beginning of the term. I would just like to show you one thing, because creativity is one of the two things. One is, these used to be socks. So these are hand-worn almost from recycled socks. And this is my knitting with plastic bags, which I have rediscovered.
Oh, I love that.
And loving.
Yeah.
And all the ends will get tucked in, and then that'll get made into something. No idea what, but you can see I used to shop at Marks and Spencer's. So those are my creative activities for now. And also, if you would like to buy Sheila's book, which she published through Worth Publishing, which is Overcoming Barriers to Learning, there's a 25% discount off that. She also talks about, you also talk about self-care in this, don't you?
I do, yes.
Professionals. And there's a lot in this book also about self-talk as well, but self-talk for the children and young people that we work with. People, please look after yourselves. You really, really matter. The work you're doing is stupendous. And thank you very much, Sheila. Thank you for spending the hour with us, and enjoy your weekends and stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheerio. Bye.